Hello, welcome to my kitchen and to this channel, About to Eat. Am I about to eat? No, actually the food that I'm making for this video won't be ready for several days, so. Anywho, my name is Andrew, and you might recognize me from this other show I do called Worth It, where I and my pals Steven and Adam go around tasting foods at different price points to find out which is the most worth it. And today I'm going to be recreating one of the favorite dishes I had on that show, ox tongue stew. Now, I want to recreate this dish for a couple of different reasons. I'm personally very interested in the fundamentals of why something tastes good. Like, really, how does food get to taste the way that it does? And I think the best way to do that is to go through the cooking process and see what's going on in there. In our egg video in Japan, we ate at this restaurant where we were primarily having this omurice. It's one of the best things I've ever eaten. It's so good and so mesmerizing. But before we ate that omelet, we had a second dish, which was the ox tongue stew. The chef said something very interesting. This is the #1 dish?
Yeah. Omurice famous #1.
Ah.
Kitchen #1.
Taste #1.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Lastly, it's been a long time since I ate that dish. I'm hoping to sort of ratatouille myself back to that moment and taste that flavor again. So this recipe is actually going to take several days to complete.
And it's simmered for 96 hours.
So to start off, I'm going to be speaking with Chef Motoki to learn more about his dish and himself and how he gets to be so awesome. Chef, so nice to see you. And Rie, thanks for joining us.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
お久しぶりです。
お久しぶりです。とても楽しみにしてたよ。いつ見ても男前だね。
You are handsome as always.
And he is handsome as always as well. You seem to have gotten younger since the last time I saw you.
それはね、タンシチューを食べたからだよ。
Oh, perfect. I remember back when we visited you, you mentioned that this was Kichi's #1 dish.
お肉料理の中で、シチューもしくはそのローストビーフとか、ビーフシチューとかタンシチューとかね、この辺のところはその方の持ってるセンス、技術、考え方で、これが微妙に如実に出てくる。シンプルな料理なんですよ。煮詰めて肉の旨味を出す料理なんですね。それだけにやはり極めて美味しいものを作りたいとね、新しい食材とか新しい技術を入れてどうのこうのという料理じゃないのでね、そこでそういう意味を込めて#1。
I'd love to hear from your perspective what the flavor of your ox tongue stew is.
一番危険な苦味ですね。美味しいんですけどね。ちょっと酸味を加えることによってしつこさを消していくっていうとこですね。だから、見た目しつこそうですが食べれば食べるほどその美味しさが増してくるっていうような表現ができた。で、旨味の分量ですけれどもね、だいぶと、皆さんしっかりと入れてますけれども、そこらは皆一緒ですね。その微妙なバランスですよね。そこが僕の味が僕の手によって作られてるっていうね、ここですよね。だからレシピはもう教えます。どうぞ作ってくださいね。作る人の数だけ味は皆違います。
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to make the dish. It was very nice seeing you again.
一緒。僕ももうめちゃくちゃハッピーオブライ。Oh yeah, oh yeah. だよ。
Hey, I don't need to translate this part, right?
No, I got that.
Got it.
Yeah, I got that. Chatting with Chef Motoki was great. He helped me out with the recipe. He also recorded himself doing some of the steps of the recipe, which I did not ask him to do, but he thought would be helpful, so he did it because he is an endlessly amazing man. I think it's also worth mentioning that I'm on the other side of the world. My ingredients are going to be a little bit different, but I'm going to be following the steps as closely as possible to try to understand the technique as best I can. So first off, the tongue. And there it is. That's a tongue. So one thing I noticed immediately is that Chef Motoki was working with a tongue without the skin, and I could only find skin on. Most recipes that you come across for preparing tongue are boiling or poaching it with the skin on and then peeling the skin afterwards. So there's not a ton of information about butchering a tongue on the internet. Okay. I gotta confess, I know that tongue is pretty common to find in Los Angeles. You can find it at delis, you can find it at taco stands. I don't think it's a gross thing. There's just this constant reminder of like, this was part of something's face. If you think about why you eat meat or what pieces of meat are prized for what purposes, the tongue actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's all muscle. So there it is. I sort of butchered it. Pun intended. The first step of Motoki's recipe is to sear it, and I think the skin would have interfered with that. With the skin on, the tongue really looks like a tongue. But in this state, it kind of just looks like a tenderloin. It's really just any other kind of meat at this point. And of course, it's important to not burn the tongue because then you wouldn't be able to taste anything. I think the tongue is browned enough, so now it's going from this pan into this pot. So next we're adding some aromatics, starting with thyme, bay leaf, and sage. And next we're going to saute some carrot, onion, and garlic. So something interesting about this step with Chef Motoki is that he's cooking it at a pretty high heat in a dry pan so that it gets this sort of color just on the outside of the vegetable. And that's pretty much all that's happening at this stage. And the last thing for this part of the recipe is to deglaze the pan with red wine and ignite it, AKA flambe. I'm just gonna quickly scrape up some of the stuff at the bottom of this pan. This is cool. Okay, great. All of the alcohol seems to be extinguished. This is basically the finished stewing liquid. And now this is actually gonna go in the oven for about 4 hours at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. There's an extremely beefy flavor permeating my entire home right now. First things first is removing, ooh, the meat is so much softer. It's almost like concerningly soft. So I'm just gonna set this aside, bring in a second pot to drain the liquid into. The tongue is now going back into the first pot. Now this liquid, and so I see Chef Motoki scraping down the top and sides of the pot and scrape, ooh. Oh, wait a second. The way that this caramelized stock on the lid smells reminds me so much of the ox tongue stew that I had back in Japan. That's where the flavor is. Oh man, it's just a paste of flavor. And I think that this caramelization of the stock is where that bitterness ultimately comes from. The tongue is going to sit in the stock overnight and cool, and tomorrow we cook it some more. Okay, so it's day 2. Making the ox tongue stew. Today it needed to simmer for another 2 hours, so I'm about halfway through that process. One other thing that I need to do is skim the top of the stock. Chef Motoki actually has a very interesting technique, ladling just a little bit of the cloudy gray stuff and then blows the ladle and the contents into the bowl. It really seems to work. It just kind of shoots the top of the layer off into the scrap bowl. Okay, so now after 2 hours, we're going to let the stock and tongue cool again together. And then tomorrow, we will continue with the recipe. Okay, here we are, the next day. So now we're just removing the tongue from the stock, and that's basically the meat done. This is gonna be wrapped up, and then this will be sliced at the final point of the dish. And what remains is to reduce this stock and to thicken it with a roux. I've made a roux before. It's equal parts flour and butter, toasted together in a pan. But in this particular recipe, the roux gets quite dark, almost the color of dark chocolate. Chef Motoki warned me that the roux would most likely be the most difficult part.
バターと小麦粉炒めるとこですね。これでいいのかなって多分ね。そのために画像を見せた方が絶対いいなと思ってね。大丈夫なのって多分作りながら思うと思うけどね。自分でこれ大丈夫なのって、悩んでください。
Let us begin. Love to melt butter. Look at that. Gonna add the butter now? I mean the flour? What are we talking about here? I guess roux is like making a dough sauce. One thing that's very interesting about Chef Motokichi's restaurant, he's essentially always using a very high burner, and he's controlling the heat of what he's cooking and just moving the pot on and off of the burner to control the amount that the butter is being toasted. Also, if I burn it, it's definitely because I'm playing with the cameras this entire time. So we now have the color of, I don't know, oatmeal here. Looking for the color of chocolate. At first I didn't think I had enough in the pot here, but the more I'm cooking it, it's really kind of transforming into much looser consistency. Oh, I'm seeing smoke. This is not good. Where's that coming from? It still looks okay. It must be just like the peripheral flour that's burning. This is one of those recipe steps that's like playing an old Mario game. You only have one life. You fall off the edge, you're done. You go back to the beginning, start over. I've switched to the silicone spatula in an attempt to get the maximum scrapage. Back in time, did people just stand around seeing how long they could cook things for? You need to get a bit darker though. We're now into like the foam of an espresso color. It's not just like a length of cooking thing, it's individual spurts of going up to the limit of burning. So you really do have to kind of be brave here. It takes a lot longer if you're less sure of yourself. Which of course I am, because I've never done this before. Okay. I think this has reached the appropriate level of darkness now. It's wild that this started as two white substances. I also want to let it just cool for a moment in the pan before I incorporate the stock. I think it'll be helpful to see what consistency it is when it isn't quite so hot. It's gotten a touch darker, and it has the kind of thick paste look that Chef Motokichi's roux does. I also am curious to taste this dark roux. If toast was a sauce. I'm relieved to find out that it doesn't taste bad in a, oh crap, I just made a mistake kind of way. Now it's just incorporating the stock in with this roux. At this point in time, it does really feel like I'm making a dessert. I mean, it really looks like I have a pot of pudding here, you know? I'm just gonna add it to the rest of the stock. Okay, so this is now gonna go in the oven uncovered for maybe like 8 or 10 hours. There's not an exact time, it's just the amount that the stock is going to reduce at this point. This is day 4. Yesterday the stock cooked in the oven. I checked it periodically, scraping down the sides to reincorporate those kind of bits on the side. And this is what we have today. And it's a very pleasing color. It's not just the shade of brown, but it's like kind of texture to the liquid. And so, just a few simple things that we're gonna be seasoning this with. First, Japanese ketchup. Similar to QP mayonnaise, it has one of these soft bottles.
甘みが欲しいので、甘さっていう部分ですよね。そこですよね。まあ砂糖の甘さとケチャップの甘さ、酸味。
Man, ketchup is really good. And then the rest of the ingredients are pretty simple. There's a little bit of soy sauce, some brown sugar, a little bit of honey, a little bit of regular salt, and lastly there's some beef stock. Chef Motokichi is using a particular Heinz brand. I couldn't find that exact product, so I found a pretty neutrally flavored beef stock. This is now just gonna simmer together for another 6 hours today. I'm gonna be doing the same procedure of checking on it, scraping down the sides, and mainly looking for an amount of reduction rather than a total cook time. Okay, it's day 5 in Sauceland. Chef Motokichi instructed me to periodically put the lid on the pot to trap some of the moisture. That steam will release some of the stuck on bits on the side, making it easier to scrape down. So it's interesting, it's kind of a combination of cooking with something wet and cooking with something dry. But I ended up with something that kind of resembles barbecue sauce. I added some more of the same neutral beef stock, and this is gonna go back in the oven for a number of hours, and tomorrow we'll be able to finally plate the dish. Okay, we finally arrived at the day where we get to eat the thing that we made. First, we're going to slice up the tongue meat. So reviewing my notes again from Chef Motoki, there is some diverse anatomy here on the tongue, and you can feel different parts have different levels of tenderness. And in Chef Motoki's plating of this dish, he cubes up the tongue and then uses different parts from different areas to kind of create a balanced set of textures in the final dish. I do first want to have a little bit of a taste of this stock on its own. It really is like a big pot of chocolate. The flavor is ridiculous. We're actually starting with a little bit of butter, and now we're just adding a little bit of red wine and a little bit of plain stock. And now we're adding a little bit of the ox tongue. Now we're just taking a bit of this sauce, and we're just going to add a little bit. And at this point, it's basically just kind of coming together, making sure it's the right thickness. Everything is warm and evenly coated. So here we have it. In Chef Motoki's instructions, he was very adamant about not wasting a single drop of this demi-glace. And after cooking it for 6 days, I really understand the motivation to scrape out every last bit. A garnish of heavy cream. And lastly, draping these vegetables on top. This is the hard part. This part snuck up on me. Here's the final dish. Look at that. Pretty close to what I experienced back at the restaurant. I mean, the flavor, on the other hand, is the real test. Ox tongue stew. Tastes really good. Or I don't know if it tastes really good or if I'm just relieved it's not terrible after 6 days. No, it's really good. Oh, here's how good it tastes. When the sound you make after taking a bite could be confused for disgust. Does it taste as good as I remember Chef Motoki's tasting? I don't think it's quite there. I think Chef Motoki achieved this depth of bitterness that mine didn't quite hit. I think mine tastes good, but it's different. It's also not surprising that Chef Motoki, with his years of experience, makes a better result. I think one of the key lessons is trying to resist your natural instinct to stop something when you thought it's been enough. This was fun. I hope you enjoyed watching. If you want to taste an actually great version of this dish, consider visiting Chef Motoki at his restaurant in Kyoto. And I can't thank him enough for helping me out with this video.
What's going on with you? If you have anything new that you'd like to talk about?
なんと、ね、僕がマイプロデュースフライパン見たいあるよここにじゃじゃーんネームイズオムちゃんアメリカのテレビショッピング目指して、今から動き出してますんでそして、アメリカの方もネットで買えるように今動いてます名前がねイタッとターナークルリンチョー
Man, I need to try this thing. Maybe it will help me be better at making the omelet.
絶対できるようまかったけどねアンドル料理上手だったけど、これだったらもうお店できるよ
I need all the help I can get.